we are saying what happens to pyruvate when oxygen is absent. I am still your teacher Osbert Nwarinda. Now, after having learned that for the case of pyruvate, that the fate of pyruvate depends on whether oxygen is present or oxygen is absent, and after having learned that when oxygen is present, the pyruvate goes into the matrix of the mitochondria and enters into the next stage, which is known as the Krebs cycle. We have been able to learn that for the case of the oxygen, when oxygen is absent, what happens? The pyruvate remains in cytoplasm. So what happens when this pyruvate remains in the what? In the cytoplasm? That's what we are now answering. Now we are saying when this pyruvate remains in the cytoplasm, this is what happens to it. This is what happens to it. Now what happens to it what happens to this pyruvate also depends on two things. What happens to this pyruvate also depends on two things. And what are those two things? Please come with me. We are saying what happens to this pyruvate also depends on two things. And what are those two things? What happens to this pyruvate also in the cytoplasm? Two things happen. And we are saying what happens to it, it depends on whether this one we are talking about is a plant. It depends on whether we are talking about plants or we are talking about animals. We're talking about animals. Now, if we are talking about this cytoplasm is for a plant cell, what occurs is different compared to when this cytoplasm, where this pyruvate has remained, is an animal cell. So we are saying if this pyruvate has remained within the cytoplasm of plants, what happens is this. What happens is this. Now this pyruvate will happen. This is what will happen now. This pyruvate you are seeing, remember it is a 3-carbon molecule, will first undergo a stage, will first lose a carbon. And in most of these reactions, whenever we lose a carbon, we lose a carbon in form of carbon dioxide. So this pyruvate, which is 3-carbon, will lose a carbon, which is a 3-carbon molecule, will lose one of the carbons in form of carbon dioxide. And once it loses that carbon, now it will turn into something which is having 2 carbons. Of course, when you think about something which has 2 carbons, one of the molecules which will be having 2 carbon atoms that it will form is none other than ethanol. It's none other than ethanol. Yeah, ethanol. This pyruvate, if you want, maybe for those who want a lot of things, you see, pyruvate is something like this, H3C, like that. A pyruvic acid, it is like that. So we are saying here we shall have it lose a carbon dioxide and return into ethanol. Ethanol is like that. CH3, ethanol, CH3C, like that. Of course, they may not ask you to put this formula, but I'm just putting them for some of those ones who are interested. But they may not, in biology, they may not ask you to give those formulas. Those formulas may not be asked, but I'm just putting them for those ones who are interested. Yeah, so we form ethanol. Now we are saying after you have formed this ethanol, now in biology, whenever we have a reaction where we have loss of a carbon dioxide, that reaction we call it a decarboxylation reaction. So we say that the pyruvate undergoes decarboxylation. This reaction here, we call it this process here, we call it decarboxylation. Decarboxylation reaction is that reaction where we have loss of a carbon, where we have loss of a carbon in form of carbon dioxide. Just like the way we have dehydrogenation, there, just like we have phosphorylation and dephosphorylation and things like that. So here we are saying the pyruvate, a 3-carbon molecule, undergoes decarboxylation. That means it loses a carbon in form of carbon dioxide to form ethanol. Now after you have formed ethanol, this ethanol that has been formed, the ethanol that has been formed, then is what now will give us our alcohol. And this alcohol is none other than, the alcohol which can come from ethanol is none other than ethanol. Now when you look at this ethanol, for those who love some chemistry, if you look at ethanol, now we have seen our ethanol is CH3C, like that. If you look at this ethanol and you look at ethanol, ethanol is CH3, CH2OH. You can easily be able to tell what exactly happens. So when you look at this, when you look at this formula here, there is something which you can easily tell. When you look at this formula, what is that? It means this ethanol would have gotten, for it to turn into this, it would have gotten more hydrogen. And what do you call, and when you get hydrogen, what happens to you? Remember, we have two terms. We have oxidation and reduction. Now in oxidation, what happens in oxidation? We say oxidation is when it means addition of oxygen, removal of hydrogen, and then removal of electrons. Then reduction, we are saying reduction means removal of oxygen, addition of electrons, and then addition of hydrogen. All those ones are referring to as, or they are referring to reduction. Now, what happens here is that now a molecule, which molecule here? Our molecule, which is what? Which is the NAD. Here, our molecule, which is our NADH. This NADH, of course, some of this NADH we have already produced them during the previous stages of glycolysis. We produced this NADH somehow, somewhere in the other process of glycolysis when we are looking at the breakdown of glycolysis. So our NADH is going to come. These ones, we have very many NADHs within the cytoplasm. So this NADH will come and donate hydrogen. And when it gives the hydrogen to this ethanol, that's why this ethanol now will be what? Remember, we are adding hydrogen to ethanol. Remember, we said when you add hydrogen, when you add electrons and you remove oxygen, that is called reduction. So it means this NAD is going to reduce ethanol. This ethanol is going to become reduced and return into ethanol. So as ethanol is being reduced into ethanol, what happens for it? It is going to be oxidized, and it's going to be oxidized to what? To NAD plus. It's going to be oxidized to NAD plus. So we are now going to have our ethanol being reduced by NADH. The NADH is going to add hydrogen to this ethanol, and that is reduction. And after it has, so when the ethanol becomes reduced, to turn into ethanol, and of course now because the ethanol has lost the hydrogen, then we say it becomes oxidized. So this will be now the NADH will now become oxidized to NAD plus. So now these are the products. So it means in plants, this is what we are going to form. The products that we are going to form here are, we have got one of them is what? One of them is here. We have got the carbon dioxide there, and we have got the ethanol here. So those are the products. Those are, because the ethanol is like an intermediate, but the final product is ethanol, and then we have got carbon dioxide. Those are the products we are forming in as far as when oxygen being absent, and in plants, these are the products that we shall form. And then when it comes to animals, when we're in animals, what will happen is this. In animals, if this was an animal cell, what will happen is that the pyruvate, this pyruvate we're having here, is a 3-carbon molecule, is going to turn into something we call lactic acid. It's going to turn into lactic acid. Now, for other people who are still interested in the formula, Okay, for those who are interested in the formula, we are saying the pyruvate. Pyruvate here, we still have our formula. Our pyruvate is here, CH3C. Pyruvate is there. We can also call it pyruvic acid. Now we are saying when you come to the lactic acid, when you look at its formula, we have something which is like this, CH3. I hope we have something like that. I think I can do like this, and then come here and I do like that. Lactic acid. So lactic acid is having such a formula there. Now, when you look at this formula and you look at that formula there, which idea comes to what comes to your mind? When you look at these two formula the way they are here, you realize that they have some similarity, but maybe one is somehow different from the other. When you look at this CH, so it means here this H has got this. It means now this pyruvate will also get more hydrogen. Shall have this pyruvate getting more hydrogen for it to be turning to the just as like we had here ethanol getting another hydrogen for it to turn into this ethanol. So here, if we were to have, you see, we have O, then we have this one. When you check here, when you compare these two structures, you see that this one is here, this one is that. So what happens? So it means you're having this one here is here. So it means, and then O is there. That means we shall need to add more hydrogen. And therefore, still, what is going to help us to add the hydrogen is none other than our NADH. So our NADH still here is going to help us. We shall have our NADH from the cytoplasm come. We shall have our NADH from the cytoplasm still coming. And when it comes here, it will still help us to add our NADH. Is going to come and help us to add hydrogen to this pyruvate. Of course, I thought this NADH usually goes in hand. We usually write it as NADH plus H. Ideally, we usually write it like this. They go together, but anyway, we can ignore that. We usually write it like that. So if you are reading some books and you find where they have put NADH plus H, that one I already explained it previously in the other previous example. When you find when they are put like this, it is the reverse of the other equation we already explained sometime when we were looking at glycolysis. When we were looking at glycolysis, I explained how all these ones come about. So you can leave it like that, or you can just simplify like that. Yeah, so we are saying we shall have our NAD giving us hydrogen and therefore helping to reduce the pyruvate into lactic acid, and of course the NAD will be oxidized into NAD plus. So in this case, that's what we are going to form. Now, when we go into these stages, sometimes this, it means the products. So the product here, in as far as plants, in as far as animals are concerned, our product is only what? Is only lactic acid. Now, this one we have formed here. These products we have formed here is what we refer to as anaerobic respiration. Now, this is anaerobic respiration. For those ones, if you still remember your O-level bit, we said in anaerobic respiration, what do we form? In anaerobic respiration, we have, first of all, we say we produce less energy in anaerobic respiration. Why do we produce less energy? Because we see that the only stage of respiration which takes place is going to be glycolysis. And then from glycolysis, we shall come here. And then now, after reaching that, will be the end. That means the only energy you're going to produce will be the other energy which we have seen from glycolysis alone, and therefore we shall not have a contribution of the other stages, like for example, like Krebs Krebs cycle. And that's why we say that in anaerobic respiration, less energy is produced. But apart from that difference, we shall say that during anaerobic respiration, the products are kind of different. For example, for aerobic, we shall have carbon dioxide, water, and of course the other energy. But for this case, if it is plants, the products are carbon dioxide and ethanol. These are the products of anaerobic respiration. You produce carbon dioxide and ethanol. When it comes to animals, we are saying anaerobic respiration can results into formation of lactic acid. Now, let me give you examples under which we can have these scenarios here. For example, you have heard about situations where they say somebody is in heavy exercise. Imagine somebody is doing some heavy exercise, you are doing some jogging heavily, especially for those ones who have even not been used. For the ones who are used, it might be somehow, but we are looking at the situation where somebody has taken time without going to the pitch, and he reaches there and he wants to do rapid. So what happens is that during that time when you are doing, for example, when you are in strenuous exercise, that situation when you are in strenuous For example, during in strenuous exercise. Strenuous, you can also call it heavy exercise. When you are doing heavy exercise, we are saying during those cases when you are doing heavy exercise, the cells in your body, the rate at which oxygen is needed is very less compared to what you will be supplying. So once the cells realize that the oxygen which is available is less, but still energy is required for you to be able to progress with running, what happens? Those cells don't just only watch, they resort to carrying out this type of respiration. When oxygen becomes less, and what you are supplying is not enough for respiration, for aerobic respiration to take place, what happens? Now the cells now turn from carrying out this, and then they resort into this type of respiration. And in that way, they produce lactic acid. Sometimes this lactic acid can even cause muscle pains, can make somebody to have a lot of pains in the muscles they are doing the exercise. It is because of this lactic acid, which is even poisonous, which is toxic to the cells. So it accumulates it makes those cells to become painful. Clear? So during strenuous exercise, we can have this lactic acid produced because at that point, the cells, the muscles are not having enough oxygen compared to the demand that is needed, that is at hand. So they resort to having this, to having this kind of pathway where the glucose is turned into pyruvate, and pyruvate is turned into lactic acid, and then lactic acid is even sometimes it is toxic and it makes you to get those muscle pains. We have got some of our friends who have got, for example, sickle cell anemia. For example, we have got some health conditions. In under health conditions, e.g., like people who have sickle cell, and those ones who have sickle cell anemia. Those ones who have got sickle cell anemia, those people have got their cells which are in a sickle shape. There's red blood cells which are in a sickle shape. We say those red blood cells do not have enough surface area for carrying enough oxygen in the body because of this appearance. When the red blood cells are like this, they cannot have enough surface area for carrying enough oxygen. So what happens? What happens is that those people who have sickle cell anemia, at a given time, there is a given time where their bodies do not get enough oxygen. So what happens when they don't have enough oxygen? So what happens is that some of those cells in their body resort, because oxygen is not around. Because it takes place, they eat food, they get glucose becomes broken down to pyruvate. But now pyruvate, instead of now going into the mitochondria and so on, what happens? The pyruvate is turned into these things. You get? And therefore, those people who have sickle cell anemia, you may find that maybe they may be somehow weak because not all stages of respiration take place to give them enough energy. And then sometimes they may get some pains somehow, somewhere. Some of those pains might be coming because of the lactic acid that is being produced from anaerobic respiration. And very many other examples that you can think of. I'm just giving you just a few hints on how, on circumstances under what we can have this situation take place in our body. If we come to the side of plants, we can have very many scenarios. For example, if you have a plant which has been there, assume you have plants which have been there, and then all of a sudden rain becomes too much, and the whole area becomes waterlogged. So in situations where we have, for example, waterlogging, in cases where we have waterlogging, plants can end up dying. Why? Because whenever there is waterlogging, what happens is, by the time you see a place when it has become waterlogged, that means within the soil, the air spaces which are found in the soil that are supposed to allow water to percolate or water to penetrate, all those air spaces would have already been filled with what? With water. So whenever you see a place when it has become waterlogged, and previously it has not been waterlogged, but now you see all of a sudden because of heavy rain, you see it when it has been waterlogged, that means all the air spaces within that soil have already been occupied by water, and there's no any other space where water can easily penetrate. Remember, the roots in a plant, within a plant, the roots within a plant are able to respire because of the oxygen which is present within the air spaces, soil air spaces. So when it rains and the rain has filled up all the air spaces within the soil, and now the soil is waterlogged, that means that air space is no longer there. That means the oxygen which was supposed to be used by the roots for breathing is no longer there. And because now the roots no longer have any oxygen to breathe, what happens is that those roots that will be in that area will now result into production with now oxygen, because oxygen is not enough. Oxygen not being enough because all the air spaces has been displaced by the water. Now those roots will not have enough oxygen in the soil. So when they don't have enough oxygen in the soil, what will happen? Those roots, for them to survive, also start carrying out to anaerobic respiration, and they will start having the glucose they have will be broken down into pyruvate, and then pyruvate will undergo this reaction to form ethanol and form ethanol. Now, when the plant root starts forming ethanol, now this ethanol becomes toxic to them. And therefore, very soon, because of this ethanol becomes toxic to them, and very soon those roots start dying. The cells in the roots start dying. When the cells in the roots start dying, of course, once the roots have died, the root cells have died, we shall no longer have any other absorption of what? Of water within the plant. And what will happen? Of course, what will happen is that the plant, or you will see the plant which is in water, but when it is drying up, and you are like, what is happening? How can a plant be having all this water when actually it is drying? It is because the roots down there have died. They no longer have oxygen to breathe, because all the air spaces in the soil has been displaced by the water. And because of that, the cells die. Why are they dying? They are dying because after carrying out anaerobic respiration to produce some energy for them to survive, this product they produce, just like the way lactic acid is toxic to you and it makes you get some muscle pain and so on. Also, this ethanol becomes toxic to the cells in the roots. The cells in the roots die. When they die, of course, they stop absorbing any other water, any other mineral salt, and so on. And therefore, the plant ends up, you see a plant dying out, even when it is immersed in water. So, waterlogging can cause this situation to happen within a plant. We have also got some plants which are always in what we call hard pans, like the plant is growing in an area where the outside part, for example, maybe cows overpass there. And when these cows overpass there, they keep compacting the soil too much that air can no longer be able to penetrate and reach into the roots down there. So such plants which are growing in areas where we have hard pans, where the soil is highly compacted, we no longer have any air spaces to allow air to penetrate into the soil for the roots to be able to breathe. Those roots also carry out anaerobic respiration and they end up dying because of ethanol, which is toxic to them. Are we together? And maybe another scenario is, for example, for these big plants, whenever you have a plant which is having a very huge stem, like the stem you cannot easily hold it like this and finish it. In most cases, plants which are like that, when you go into that stem, the cells which are always in the middle of that stem, do not get oxygen. Remember, cells within a stem are able to breathe using air that enters through what we call lenticels. Those are small pores within the stem. It is not true that air which enters into the leaves is what the stems use. No. The stems use the air they are able to take up through lenticels. Those are small pores within the stem. But when the stem is too big, we are saying the air which enters through those lenticels may not be able to reach into deeper layers of that stem. So what happens? It means the cells in the middle of that stem, chances are high that they are likely to die. Why? Because they may not get enough oxygen for their own respiration. So in the middle of a big stem, we are saying what happens there in most cases is anaerobic respiration, because we are saying in that middle of the stem, oxygen may not easily reach there from outside through lenticels. Through those small pores on the stem, it may not be able to reach deep there. So in the middle of that big stem, we may end up having this process take place there. So cells in the middle of that big stem may not necessarily be living, they might actually be dead cells. You get? Now those are all circumstances under what we are talking about here. So as I talk about this thing, don't look at them as if they are abstract. No, these are things which are real, which take place that you need to appreciate, that occur in me and you. Now, as I conclude this thing, we are saying, in general, this process here, where you have pyruvate broken down to form lactic acid and so on and so forth, we are saying this one we refer to it as, this is also generally referred to as lactate fermentation. Lactate fermentation. fermentation, just like the way this one here, where you have your plants undergo this type of respiration to produce, to finally produce alcohol. We also refer to it as alcoholic fermentation. Of course, alcoholic because we are forming ethanol. Fermentation is a special type of anaerobic respiration. Though when we talk about fermentation, we are always usually referring to breakdown of glucose by usage of living organisms. That is, I think, the reason as to why we are calling it fermentation here is because in most cases, this situation in real life, where this is a normal kind of business, where it is a normal situation that you have this process taking place normally, it is usually common in yeast. A yeast that is a fungi, it's a fungus. So in yeast, usually this one is a normal process. In yeast, with the help of enzymes, glucose is broken down into pyruvate, and pyruvate ends up forming ethanol. So because it's common in yeast, that's why we are referring to it as fermentation, because now yeast is a microorganism which is enabling the breakdown of glucose into alcohol. Likewise, when you come here, why it is called lactate fermentation is because, for example, when you go to bacteria, there's a bacteria which is called lab. It's called lab, I think, LAB, capital L, capital A, capital B. Lactic acid bacteria. Those bacteria usually deal with milk. Milk kind of, they are actually, some of those bacteria actually used in production of yogurt and so on. So in such kind of bacteria, which usually help in processing of yogurt for them, they're able to break down the sugars in milk in absence of oxygen and end up forming lactic acid. This lactic acid sometimes is what gives that kind of a taste within some taste within yogurt and so on and so forth. Yeah, so because it is also carrying in that area, it is like, for example, in some bacteria, that's why we're also calling it fermentation, but that's a general name. We can refer to this, So just in case you meet these words anywhere, somewhere, as you are reading, we are connecting them. So you're connecting this. Lactate is from lactic acid. Alcoholic is from ethanol, which is an alcohol. All together. Now, after appreciating all this, now in our next thing, we shall be able to learn or to see exactly what happens within what we have known as Krebs cycle. So come with me as we go into expounding more on what occurs within the Krebs cycle, having finished glycolysis. May God bless you.